Hi, this is Michael Yardney, and the latest Australian Bureau of Statistics employment figures released last week showed that unemployment rose to 5.7%. And boy did the media have a field day with headlines like, "The worst rise in unemployment in 18 years." Unfortunately, unemployment will keep rising over the next year or two. That's what happens in a recession. So it's natural for us to ask, how will unemployment affect our property markets? Interestingly, as I spoke to many investors over the last few weeks when I conducted my seminars around Australia, many highlighted the fear of rising unemployment as their single greatest concern for the property markets in the near-term future. Now, my simple answer to them was, unemployment will affect different parts of our property markets differently, but the good news is, it probably won't affect property as much as you fear. Just putting things into perspective, our current unemployment rate is coming off historic recent lows. In 2001, at the start of the strong property boom that worked its way around Australia over the next few years, unemployment peaked at 7.1%. Interestingly, in 2006, unemployment was 5%, and the 10-year average for unemployment's been 7.2%. In fact, most economists consider 5% to be full employment. Now, to help you understand what I mean by this, let's use a property analogy. I'm sure you've heard that when looking at rental vacancy rates, it's said that our property markets are in equilibrium when vacancies are at around 3%. Higher vacancy rates means that there are more properties available than there are tenants looking for them, so rents don't rise. When vacancy rates fall below 3% and there are more tenants in the market than there are properties, landlords can push up rents. So it's much the same with employment. Full employment is considered when the unemployment rate is 5%. In fact, I remember when first learning about this years and years ago, it was considered that we'd never get the unemployment rate in Australia below 10%. But to gain a better understanding of how employment will affect property prices, there are a number of other points we need to consider. Firstly, just looking at a figure of 5% or 7% unemployment isn't enough. When looking at statistics, we need to look at the participation rate and the levels of female employment, which have both risen substantially over recent months as households prepare themselves for the hard times ahead. Also, the current unemployment figures reflect the influx of school leavers and graduates who can't find work, more than the number of workers laid off. Now, of course, very few school leavers or graduates would be homeowners who'd be putting their properties on the market at the moment, would they? Now, if you think about it, just under 30% of all Australians rent their homes, and about 34% of Australians own their homes outright. This latter group are unlikely to put their properties on the market if they lose their jobs, and while those who are unable to work or don't have work are overrepresented amongst renters, they also don't have properties to sell. The groups that are going to be hardest hit by unemployment will be those 35% or so of people who've already got a mortgage and or maybe highly geared property investors. And of course, not everyone who loses their job will suddenly put their home on the market. Many will come from two-income families where both husband and wife work. If you combine this with higher household equity, lower interest rates, and the measures being put into place by some of our banks who are going to be delaying payments or capitalising interest for up to a year, giving payment relief to the unemployed, all this should result in fewer forced sales and more price stability. Now, that's not to say that all areas will get out of this downturn easily. Levels of unemployment will vary significantly from suburb to suburb. Some areas will feel the brunt of unemployment, and as a result, the property markets in these areas will be affected. For example, Fairfield in Sydney currently has an unemployment rate of over 15%, 3 times the national average, while Bondi has a rate of only 3.7%. Now, looking back at the last 3 downturns, rising unemployment didn't necessarily cause property prices to fall. In our major urban property markets, it seems that unemployment has to rise above 10% and then stay there for some time before it negatively impacts on property values. On the other hand, in smaller labour markets, and especially those based around single industries, persistent unemployment rates higher than 7% start affecting property prices. Regional communities as well as holiday locations are likely to be in for a bit of a shock too, aren't they? Some are already beginning to feel the heat, including Adelaide, which appears to be struggling with relatively high unemployment figures. Of course, different industry sectors will be affected in different ways too. The mining and manufacturing industries will be hit hard, and areas that had an economy underpinned by these workforces are more likely to fall in value. And unemployment is not necessarily going to be higher at the bottom end of the labour market, as many people seem to think. There's many people in the finance, banking and marketing industries who are losing their job. On the other hand, health, education and public service industries will have a low risk of rising unemployment, and workers in these fields have more certainty around their income. As I tend to mention regularly in these market commentaries, there are two worlds out there. During this recession, some people are hurting. That's terrible. And on the other hand, some are thriving. The gap between the rich and the average Australian is widening. If you want to thrive and not just survive in these difficult times, please check out details of my new book, interestingly called Thriving, Not Just Surviving in Changing Times. Please click on the link below and find out more, and pre-order your copy because stocks are going to be arriving in about a week or so. Now, all these statistics I've been mentioning to you are dreadful for people who are unemployed. I understand that. Because they're not numbers, it's their lives. But the reality is, if 7 or 8% of our population is not working, then over 90% of our population is. And for them, nothing changes, except rising unemployment is going to put a downward pressure on interest rates. Many interest rates will be lower, petrol will be cheaper, and their level of disposable income is going to be significantly boosted. Some will go into recession mode and put off their buying decisions. They won't buy a new car or move house or buy an investment property. While others are going to take advantage of the reduced competition and the lower prices out there and buy that new car or upgrade their home or purchase an investment property before the next property upswing. And that's surely going to come. These sophisticated property investors see absolutely amazing opportunities currently because the field's been cleared for them. There's much less competition out there and property holding costs are cheaper. They're going to have the confidence to go out and buy the right type of property, one below its intrinsic value, in an area with a proven record of strong capital growth, and a property to which they can add value through renovations or redevelopment. While these investors will thrive in these difficult times, others are going to have difficulty surviving. By the way, in these changing times, like we're experiencing, no one can help you quite like the multi-award-winning team of independent property strategists at Metropole. And remember, we help homeowners too, not just property investors. We've got no properties to sell, but we've got access to every property on the market. So if you want to find out a bit more about what's happening in your local market and what our research suggests in store, please join us at a free property briefing in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane in our boardrooms. Just click on the link below to find out more and reserve your place.